Lila Jensen hadn't slept in 3 days, since her 12-year-old son, Ethan, had been rushed to St. Mary's Medical Center after his bicycle collided with a speeding SUV. She'd been perched on that uncomfortable recliner chair, praying for any sign of progress, at 5:45 a.m., just as the first pale light filtered through the blinds. Her phone buzzed. Beatrice, her mother, calling. "Lila," came the crisp voice over the speaker. "You need to help set up for Valerie's birthday tomorrow. We'll start at 10. Lila's heart pounded. "I'm here with Ethan," she insisted, her voice cracking. "Tomorrow is not the time," she whispered, glancing at her son's ventilator. There was only silence for a moment before Beatrice's tone hardened. "If you don't come, I'll cut you off." Lila closed her eyes. Fighting tears, she could no longer hold back. No amount of exhaustion could blind her to the truth. Her mother still saw her as inadequate, a disappointment in their perfectly curated suburban world. As she ended the call and deleted Beatrice's number, Lila felt a shiver of both fear and relief. Ethan's frail chest rose and fell in rhythmic beeps, and she whispered to him about spring afternoons at the science museum they'd planned. The world outside might demand her presence at a party, but Lila's place was right here, beside her son, because love, not obligation, held this room together. Lila Hastings still remembers the hush that settled over their pristine Connecticut neighborhood whenever her mother, Catherine, stepped outside. To the neighbors, Catherine was the embodiment of success, polished, articulate, and always impeccably dressed, as though she'd just stepped out of a lifestyle magazine, behind closed doors. However, that same exacting standard fell like a shadow over Lila's childhood. From the time Lila could first recite the alphabet, Catherine made it clear that only one thing mattered: perfection. Lila's younger sister, Emma, embodied what Catherine prized most. At age 10, Emma was already winning piano competitions. By 12, she'd earned straight A's without ever cracking a book in front of her mother. At every family gathering, neighbors and relatives alike praised Emma's musical talent and effortless poise. Meanwhile, Lila's own achievements, her B+ in literature, her modest third-place finish in the local soccer tournament, were routinely dismissed as nice. But not enough. "Why can't you be more like Emma?" became the refrain that echoed through Lila's formative years, a constant reminder that she would never measure up. Robert, Lila's father, worked long hours as a CPA in Hartford. Whenever he was home, he tried to soften Catherine's criticism with words of encouragement. "Honey, you're doing great. Don't worry so much." But he was no match for Catherine's iron will. By the time Lila reached high school, she had given up any hope of winning her mother's approval. At 17, she hung back from family parties, retreating instead to the attic to write in her journal or tinker with an old 35mm camera she'd saved up for. It was the one thing, she discovered, that felt entirely her own. Lila found solace behind the lens, through photography. She learned to see beauty in everyday moments: a neighbor's golden retriever dozing in a sunbeam, an elderly couple's wrinkled hands clasped together as they crossed the street. The camera became an extension of her heart, allowing Lila to capture the authenticity that Catherine so often dismissed as messy or imperfect. At the same time, Lila volunteered at the local animal shelter on Saturday mornings, amid barking dogs and purring cats. She felt the unconditional affection that had been scarce in her own home, as she gently brushed a tabby's matted fur or walked a rescue terrier around the block. Lila realized that kindness and empathy, qualities she cultivated in silence, could mean more than any trophy or grade. When Lila started college at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, she majored in visual arts with a concentration in documentary photography. In her sophomore year, she met Jack Miller, a mechanical engineering student on an ROTC scholarship, who planned to join the Army upon graduation. Jack's easy smile and genuine curiosity felt like a breath of fresh air. He spent hours listening to Lila describe her latest photo project, whether it was a series on aging veterans or images of urban wildlife, and never once made her feel inadequate. Instead, he praised her vision and told her that her photographs had a rare authenticity, like moments frozen in time. Their friendship blossomed naturally. Jack invited Lila to join him at campus events honoring military veterans, and she, in turn, taught him basic camera techniques. They bonded over late-night study sessions at the library and long walks along the Connecticut River in autumn, where the crisp air smelled of pine and fallen leaves. For the first time, Lila felt truly seen. Jack's family welcomed her to their Sunday dinners in Springfield, where the table overflowed with comfort food: macaroni and cheese, green bean casserole, and apple pie. Laughter filled the room as cousins exchanged stories, and Lila could not help but notice how different this warmth was from the conditional affection she'd experienced at home. When Jack asked Lila to marry him at 22, Her heart soared, but she also braced herself for Catherine's response. At their small engagement party, held under a canopy of twinkling lights in Jack's parents' backyard, Catherine's congratulations came with an edge. "So you're throwing away your future for an army guy," she said, her voice low enough for only Lila to hear. "What about a proper graduate program? What about stability?" Lila held Jack's hand tightly, determined not to let her mother's words unravel her joy. Despite Catherine's disapproval, Jack and Lila married in a modest ceremony at a chapel near campus. Catherine attended but never took her disapproving gaze off the bride, critiquing everything from Lila's simple bouquet of daisies to the fact that the reception catered local fare instead of something more upscale. It was only when Robert slipped Lila a $100 bill under the table that she felt a flicker of paternal pride. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. For the first time, Lila believed it. In that moment, Lila realized she was forging a different path, one defined by authenticity, compassion, and creative passion rather than her mother's narrow definition of success. As she and Jack drove off on their honeymoon, Lila gazed at the city skyline receding behind them and felt a quiet confidence blossom. This was her life, and for the first time, it felt entirely her own. Lila Hastings first noticed Jack Miller on an overcast September afternoon during her sophomore year at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. She was crouched on the steps of the Fine Arts Building, reviewing the latest contact sheets from her black and white photography project and assignment documenting the lives of local veterans when Jack, dressed in a crisp ROTC uniform, offered a shy smile as he passed by with a stack of engineering textbooks tucked under one arm. He stopped and asked her about the camera in her lap. Their conversation began hesitantly mechanical engineering versus visual arts, but within minutes, they discovered a shared curiosity that transcended their different fields of study. Jack admired her ability to capture emotion in a single frame. Lila was intrigued by his determination to serve his country, knowing that an army career demanded both courage and selflessness. Over the following weeks, they kept running into each other in the library stacks, at campus coffee shops, even on the quad when autumn leaves painted the sidewalks red and gold. Lila showed Jack how to load film into her vintage Leica. He taught her basic principles of optics so she could better understand how light passed through a lens. They became study partners in a makeshift way. She would help him sketch diagrams for his mechanics homework, and he would accompany her to the local VA hospital to photograph aging veterans for her documentary project. The more time they spent together, the more Lila realized that Jack's easy laughter and genuine interest in her work filled a void she'd long carried. He never compared her to anyone else, never weighed her achievements against a yardstick of perfection. Instead, Jack celebrated every thank you note she received from a veteran, every positive critique her professors offered. For the first time, Lila felt seen not as the daughter who fell short of her mother's expectations, but as someone whose creativity and compassion mattered. By the end of her third semester, their friendship had deepened into something neither could ignore. One chilly November evening, Lila attended a ROTC-sponsored dinner at a campus event space. Jack was in full uniform, his crisp appearance more than a nod to military tradition. It was a testament to the discipline he carried into every aspect of his life. Lila arrived clutching a roll of film, hoping to sneak a few candid shots of Jack laughing with his teammates. As the dinner wound down, Jack guided her into a quiet corner beneath the vaulted ceiling. The din of conversation faded behind them as he confessed that he admired her eye for capturing truth, that he saw in her photographs something rare empathy laid bare. Lila, who had spent so many years retreating into herself to avoid her mother's criticism, felt a warmth bloom in her chest. In that moment, amidst the polished surfaces of silverware and the murmur of civilian and cadet mingling, Jack asked if she would accompany him on a weekend trip to visit his family in Springfield, Massachusetts. The following months were a whirlwind. During winter break, Lila traveled to Jack's childhood home, a modest ranch house lined with family photos of grandparents in uniform, high school graduation portraits, and candid snapshots of Sunday barbecues, over plates of lasagna and apple pie. Lila met Jack's parents for the first time. They welcomed her with genuine enthusiasm, peppering her with questions about her photography and praising her gentle manner with Jack's younger cousins. Lila noted the stark contrast between this warm, Midwestern hospitality and the conditional approval she habitually received from her own mother, Catherine. For the first time, she allowed herself to envision a life built on mutual respect instead of constant comparison. As spring arrived, Jack and Lila's bond only strengthened. He accompanied her to exhibitions in downtown Northampton, where she showcased her images of World War II and Vietnam veterans. In turn, Lila proudly sat through his senior design presentation's elaborate models of mechanical prototypes destined for military use. Their families began to intertwine naturally. Jack invited Lila to accompany him to reunions of his great-uncle's Air Force squadron, while Lila introduced Jack to her childhood friend group during a weekend trip to her father Robert's suburban home in Connecticut. Robert, aware of Lila's strained relationship with Catherine but hopeful for his daughter's happiness, offered cautious encouragement. He could see how Jack lifted Lila's spirits, how Lila made Jack laugh with her quiet wit. Toward the end of Jack's junior year, he and Lila found themselves sitting on a bench by the Connecticut River, the late afternoon sun glinting off the water. Jack took Lila's hand, his gaze steady. He told her he was proud of her journey from a shy art student, someone who had always felt inadequate, to someone whose photographs sparked conversations about aging, service, and sacrifice. Then, kneeling on one knee in front of the gentle current, he asked Lila to be his wife. Lila, her throat tight with emotion, said yes without hesitation. For a brief moment, they allowed themselves to imagine a shared future, Jack returning from army training to help her set up her first professional camera darkroom, Lila documenting Jack's wedding day with her signature blend of sensitivity and clarity. The engagement announcement, however, brought their joyous news into conflict with Catherine's expectations. A small dinner was planned at a country club near the UMass campus, ostensibly to introduce Lila's parents to Jack's future in-laws. The evening air was tinged with spring blossoms, but inside the private dining room, tension hovered like an unwelcome guest. Catherine arrived in a tailored navy sheath dress, an expression of polite amusement barely concealed beneath her practiced smile. As wine glasses clinked and napkins folded into perfect triangles, Lila's father Robert offered a warm toast to my daughter Lila and her fiancé Jack. May you both find happiness in this journey together. Lila's heart fluttered. This was the moment when she might finally bask in her mother's pride. Instead, Catherine raised her own glass and offered a thin-lipped smile. Well, I suppose congratulations are in order, she said, her voice measured. Then, leaning closer so that only Lila could hear, she murmured, You're throwing away your future for a military boy. Have you even considered a graduate program? What about stability? You know how hard it is for photographers to build a steady income. Lila's chest tightened, but before she could respond, Jack's mother, Carol Miller, raised her glass. To Lila, who has already proven that her art reflects truth and heart, and to my son, who knows that courage isn't just about uniforms, it's about standing by the person you love. The room erupted in polite applause. Even so, Catherine's words hung in the air long after the toasts concluded. Lila felt the familiar pang of inadequacy, that old question, why can't you do more, but having spent the last year side by side with Jack? She recognized her own worth beyond any trophy or grade. She would pursue graduate school one day. Yes, but not at the expense of the partnership she'd found. Jack reached across the table and squeezed her hand, a simple gesture that reminded her she wasn't alone. The wedding plans unfolded in the summer sunshine. Lila and Jack chose a modest community chapel for their ceremony, just a short drive from Amherst. The reception would take place in the same park where they had first shared coffee, under a canopy of white tents strung with fairy lights. Lila designed a series of photographs for the program invites, sepia-toned images of their journey, Jack teaching her to photograph snow-covered veterans during winter, Lila cheering at Jack's third-year commissioning ceremony, the two of them walking hand in hand beneath a canopy of spring blossoms. Each snapshot told a story of mutual respect and shared dreams rather than perfection. When the wedding day arrived, Catherine attended but remained distant. She faulted the simple floral arrangements, the absence of a string quartet, and even the casual dress code in her polite, detached way. Yet, as Lila walked down the aisle in a simple ivory gown, no train, no extraneous embellishments, Jack's smile told her everything she needed to know. He would love her unconditionally. In front of 50 family members and friends, they exchanged vows, pledging to support each other's ambitions, whether in an army barracks or a photographer's darkroom. As they drove away from the chapel under a cascading shower of rose petals, Lila felt a sense of liberation she'd never known. Yes, Catherine's approval remained elusive. Yes, there would be moments of tension, particularly when, months later, they announced Lila's decision to pursue a freelance photography career instead of applying immediately to graduate school. But with Jack by her side, she had discovered something more enduring than maternal praise, the confidence to define her own path, to find beauty and purpose on her own terms. And when their son Tyler was born a year later, with his father's curly hair and her green eyes, Lila knew she had already built a foundation of love, unconditional and unwavering. The bond between Lila and Jack, forged through academic pursuits and tempered by familial challenges, would carry them forward, in Jack's arms. Lila learned that strength wasn't about living up to someone else's standards, but about honoring her own voice, capturing life's imperfect moments just as they are. After the wedding, Lila and Jack settled into a modest two-bedroom townhouse near Springfield, Massachusetts. Jack continued his Army training and occasional deployments, while Lila balanced her freelance photography work with part-time evenings as a gallery assistant. Their first winter together was cozy each Saturday. Jack would bundle up in his uniform's dress coat and snow boots, greeting Lila with a warm smile at the door. They'd walk to the local coffee shop, where Lila brewed up ideas for her next portrait series while Jack outlined his plans to serve as an Army engineer. Nearly a year later, in early October, Lila gave birth to their son, Tyler. He arrived mid-morning at Mercy Hospital, weighing a healthy 8 pounds, 2 ounces, in the hushed delivery room. Lila felt Jack's hand pressed against her back between contractions. When Tyler finally emerged, a pink, squalling bundle with his father's curly hair and her bright green eyes, Jack pressed his lips to Lila's forehead. "We did it," he whispered. "He's perfect." Over the next days in the hospital, Lila monitored Jack's visit schedule. He was eager to get back to training, but insisted on spending at least 2 hours each evening in the nursery, murmuring softly to his son as though already forging a bond that would endure even if deployments pulled him overseas. By the time Tyler was 6 months old, Jack had shipped off for his first 9-month deployment to Iraq. Lila held his letter close to her heart and promised her son that Daddy's uniform meant he was helping keep their country safe. She spent each evening rocking Tyler to sleep, recounting stories about how brave Jack was and how proud he was of her photography. Days were long, waking at 6:00 a.m. to fix oatmeal and fruit for Tyler, then packing him into his car seat to drop him at daycare by 7:30 a.m., laughing at his gummy smile as he grabbed at the mobile of puppies spinning above his crib. From 8:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m., Lila worked at the gallery hanging new prints, talking to patrons about each photographer's vision, and occasionally slipping out to snap shots of fall foliage along the Connecticut River on her lunch hour. Still, each afternoon carried a twinge of apprehension. When 5:00 p.m. rolled around, Lila would collect Tyler, now nearly 2, from daycare and head to the small playground by their townhouse. She'd push him on the swings, listening to his delighted squeals as he flew high, imagining Jack's face beaming when he saw their son learn how to swing independently. Every few weeks, Lila and Tyler would bundle into the car, driving 2.5 hours to Norfolk, Virginia, to spend a long weekend with Jack's parents. Those weekends became a lifeline dinner at 1:00 p.m. on Sundays, complete with mashed potatoes, roasted chicken, and green beans, followed by a walk around the lake to stretch tired legs. Jack's mother, Carol, doted on her grandson, reading him board books, teaching him Old MacDonald how to farm, and praising Lila's photography of family gatherings for capturing genuine laughter rather than stiff, posed smiles. Just a few months later, when Tyler turned 2, Jack's colonel awarded him a medal for exemplary service in a small ceremony on base. Jack accepted the commendation from his commanding officer, his posture impeccably straight. Lila and Tyler watched from the front row, and afterward, Jack swept them into a warm embrace. He whispered, "You two make everything worth it," before posing for the family photo that Lila would later print and hang over their living room mantel, a tangible reminder that even long separations couldn't break their bond. Then, in early spring, the unthinkable happened. Lila received 2 Army officers at her doorstep, their faces solemn and uniforms crisp, carrying a folded flag. Time seemed to stop as they recited carefully chosen words. Jack had been killed by an improvised explosive device in Afghanistan. Lila felt as though the ground had opened beneath her. Tyler, now almost 3 years old and clutching his favorite dinosaur toy, looked from his mother to the men in uniform and emitted a small gasp, the single word "Daddy" spilling from his lips. Lila knelt beside him, wrapping Tyler in her arms. Through her tears, she forced herself to reply, "Daddy's a hero. He loves you so much." But inside, her heart splintered. The weeks that followed blurred together. Lila navigated countless paperwork details, benefits, life insurance forms, and service arrangements while shouldering grief for a husband she still saw in every photograph and memory. Financially, they were secure. Jack's life insurance check and military death benefits covered their expenses. Emotionally, however, Lila felt adrift. She moved herself and Tyler into a smaller apartment closer to her parents in Hartford for extra support. But living under their roof meant contending with her mother Catherine's constant criticism. "You can't raise a child on your own, especially not after losing your husband." she would say, as though Lila had failed at both motherhood and widowhood. Lila retreated into photography, spending hours capturing candid shots of daycare playrooms and local farm animals, finding solace in the quiet focus of the lens. Tyler, sensing the tension, drifted into a shy shell around his grandmother. When he asked questions, "Why can't I see Daddy, or will Daddy come home soon?" Lila held him close, teaching him gently about memory and bravery. She told him that Jack's spirit lived on in their family, in Tyler's laughter, in the camera's click, and in the kindness people offered, each night, before bed. They'd watch old home videos of Jack's laugh as he chased Tyler around the living room, his playful teasing echoing in their minds long after the screen went dark. As months passed, Lila returned to her routines, dropping Tyler at daycare at 7:00 a.m., then spending her days photographing local veterans or volunteering at the animal shelter, a place where she felt at home amid barking dogs and contented cats. She relied on her colleagues as support. Co-workers occasionally brought home-cooked casseroles and meatloaf, leaving them on her doorstep without fanfare. Tyler's daycare teacher organized a rotating schedule, ensuring that Lila could attend her occasional photography exhibits or meet with potential clients. Meanwhile, Jack's parents flew up from Virginia every few months, spending week-long visits that felt like lifelines for both mother and son. During those visits, they would reassure Tyler that his father was proud of him and encourage Lila to keep chasing her dreams. 3 months after Jack's passing, Lila received a medal on his behalf at a small ceremony at the Springfield Community Center. Standing at the podium, she cradled Tyler in her arms as the mayor praised Jack's service and sacrifice. Tears streamed down Lila's face, but she also felt a swell of pride. Jack's legacy lived on in every ache and triumph of their new life. As guests offered condolences, Lila quietly accepted each hug and handshake. When the ceremony ended, she walked out into the crisp spring air. Tyler nestled against her chest, his head resting comfortably on her shoulder. In that moment, Lila resolved to honor Jack's memory through every photograph she took, every bedtime story she told Tyler, and every brave step she took forward alone, but never truly alone, because Jack's love and her own inner strength would always guide her path. Lila Hastings felt as though she were walking through a snowstorm, even on warm spring days, after the Army officers delivered the news of Jack's death. His life insurance check and military benefits covered their bills, but money couldn't warm the empty space where his laughter once filled the room, with 3-year-old Tyler clutching his favorite dinosaur plush. Lila packed a few belongings and moved into a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Hartford, just 10 miles from her parents' suburban home, hoping for support, yet dreading the old criticisms that awaited her. Catherine, Lila's mother, met them at the front door one Saturday morning, arms crossed, as though she were inspecting a flawed new car. "You can't possibly raise a child on your own," she declared, her voice low enough to ensure only Lila heard, "especially not after losing your husband." Lila forced a polite smile, putting Tyler on the worn carpet where he immediately crawled toward his toy truck. She replied calmly, "We're fine. Mom, I have the benefits, and I'll find work shifts that fit around daycare hours." But Catherine's eyebrows arched, her lips pursed in that familiar expression of disapproval. "Honey, you need a steady job. Photography is a hobby, not a career. You'll never provide stability that way." Lila's heart sank, but she had rehearsed her response. "I start part-time at the gallery tomorrow. I can also freelance on weekends." Catherine sniffed, as though Lila had suggested living in a tent. Tyler tugged at Lila's sleeve, his green eyes wide. "Mommy, you okay?" he asked in his 3-year-old lilt. Lila knelt, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "I'm okay, sweetheart. How about we make pancakes later?" The simple promise sparked a small smile on his face, proof that, despite everything, she was still his safe place. During the day, Lila found solitude at the animal shelter where she'd once volunteered. The scent of straw and hay mingled with soft barks and meows. And within that chaos, she rediscovered a rhythm that steadied her pulse. From 9:00 a.m. until noon each weekday, she brushed tabbies with matted fur and walked timid puppies around the fenced yard, tasks that reminded her life could still be about nurturing and care. On her lunch break, she edited photographs of Hartford's aging war veterans, men and women in their 70s and 80s, stooped but dignified, whose medals gleamed in the midday sun. These images would later appear at the community center's Memorial Day exhibit, where Lila hoped to honor Jack's service through her lens. Most afternoons, she dropped Tyler at the daycare 2 blocks from her apartment. He loved the brightly colored blocks and the teacher's gentle patience when he recited Old MacDonald for the 1,000th time. By 8:00 a.m., she was at the local gallery, wiping smudges off glass frames and greeting visitors as they perused prints of cityscapes and portraits. She was learning to juggle the gallery's late afternoons shifts that ended at 4:00 p.m. with her freelance assignments, senior portraits, small wedding gigs, even graduation photos at a local high school. Each job brought in a few $100s, enough to cover rent and groceries. And sometimes, she treated herself to a cup of coffee from the cafe across the street. The barista, an older gentleman named Mr. Willis, often slipped an extra biscotti into her bag. "Keep your strength up," he'd say, and Lila appreciated the quiet kindness. Jack's parents, Carol and Frank Miller, flew up from Norfolk every few months, staying in a guest room Lila had set aside. On those weekends, the tiny apartment felt less like a cage and more like a cradle. Frank spent hours playing Legos with Tyler, showing him how to stack the colorful bricks, while Carol fussed over Lila fixing her a sandwich or reminding her to wear a sweater, even if the weather felt warm. One Sunday evening in July, they surprised Lila with news. "We applied for a small grant in Jack's honor," Carol announced during a quiet dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. "It's for a camera lens, so that you can continue your photography, especially projects about local veterans." Jack would have wanted that. Lila's throat tightened as she selected her words carefully. "Thank you, this means more than you know." 3 months after Jack's death, Lila was invited to accept his posthumous medal at a ceremony in the Springfield Community Center. She held Tyler, now nearing his 4th birthday, against her chest as Mayor Delgado praised Jack's bravery. The medal gleamed under the bright stage lights, and as Lila stepped forward to receive it, she thought she might collapse under the weight of grief and pride. She tucked Tyler's small hand inside hers, letting him grip the velvet-lined box containing his father's honor. When the ceremony ended, the crowd filed out, but Lila lingered, watching her son's wide eyes follow her every movement. Walking back to Hartford that evening, they paused at a bus stop beneath an old oak tree. Tyler looked up at her and asked, "Mommy, will Daddy be proud of me?" Lila knelt so their eyes met. "Yes, sweetheart, he's proud of you right now, being brave, helping me take pictures of veterans, and loving him even when he isn't here." Tyler nodded solemnly, staring into her green eyes, his small hand tightening around hers. "I miss him," he whispered. Lila wrapped her arms around him and felt, for the first time since Jack's death, that they might be okay. In the weeks that followed, Lila's schedule remained grueling: mornings at the animal shelter, afternoons at the gallery, evenings editing photos or catching a few fitful hours of sleep. Yet her heart felt lighter when, during the local VFW meeting, an elderly veteran approached her with a handshake and a tear in his eye. "Sweetheart, your photos of us remind people what we've done, not just what we've been through," he said. Lila blinked back tears as she realized that through her lens, Jack's memory and those of other heroes would endure. She smiled down at Tyler, who sat contentedly beside her, and whispered, "We're building something good here." As summer's heat gave way to crisp autumn days, Lila continued to carve out a life of purpose. She and Tyler carved pumpkins together in early October, their small kitchen filled with laughter and the scent of cinnamon. She balanced her mother's well-intentioned advice with the growing conviction that they could thrive without Catherine's conditional love. Every snapshot she took, whether a veteran's weathered face or Tyler's first steps at a playground, reminded her that resilience and compassion could bloom even after the harshest winters. And with each click of the camera, she captured not only images but also hope, a legacy far stronger than grief. One held fast by a mother and son determined to find light in their darkest days. Lila slumped into the vinyl chair in the small hospital chapel, her uniformed shoulders sagging under the weight of exhaustion and guilt. Just 10 feet away, her son, 12-year-old Tyler, lay motionless in the pediatric ICU, hooked to machines no parent ever wants to see. She had been at his side for 4 straight days, refusing to leave, convinced that her mere presence was the only thing keeping him tethered to consciousness. Yet, with each passing hour, the lines between hope and despair blurred until she scarcely recognized herself. The chaplain, Father James Whitaker, offered a gentle smile as he sank onto the adjacent pew. His kindly eyes, creased from decades of comforting anguished families, met hers without judgment. "Lila," he began softly, "I know it's hard to leave his bedside, but even the strongest caregivers need rest. Sometimes stepping away for just a moment can renew your strength to be here for him when it counts." She stared at the floor, her throat too tight for words. All she could think of was the steady beep of the monitor and the soft hiss of the ventilator sounds she feared losing if she wasn't there. Father Whitaker slid a pamphlet across the pew, its cover showing a kneeling figure bathed in warm light. "This is about finding balance," he said. "Caring for yourself is not abandonment, it's a necessity. Your body and heart need nourishment to support Tyler's battle." Lila nodded, though her mind raced. She recalled how, in her 20 years, no one had ever let her rest when she needed it, certainly not her mother, Catherine, whose expectations had always eclipsed her own needs. Later that afternoon, after a quick shower in the family lounge, Lila returned to Tyler's room to find text messages flooding her phone. Vanessa, her sister, had sent a string of notifications. Each chime of her phone felt like a fresh punch to the gut. They treated Tyler's critical condition as a mere inconvenience, something that shouldn't disrupt family traditions. Lila locked her phone and slipped it into her purse, its screen dark. If they couldn't ask how Tyler was doing or offer genuine support, their words only whispered that his life mattered less than Vanessa's planned celebration. That evening, Dr. Samuel Patel, the attending neurologist, appeared at the foot of Tyler's bed. His stethoscope gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ICU. "Miss Hastings," he said in his calm, measured tone, "I see you've been here continuously for 4 days. It takes an immense toll on anyone emotionally and physically. You need short breaks, proper meals, a few minutes outside for fresh air. If you collapse, you won't be any help to your son." Lila met his gaze, her eyes rimmed with fatigue. "I can't leave him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dr. Patel softened his expression. "I understand. If he were my child, I'd feel the same. But think of it this way, putting on your own oxygen mask first is how you ensure you can breathe for him when he needs it most." As he left, Lila felt the weight of his words settle around her like a blanket. She glanced at Tyler, his pale face peaceful under the gentle hum of machines. In that moment, she realized that self-care was not a betrayal. It was an act of love. She switched off her phone entirely, silencing the unrelenting barrage of guilt-laden messages. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting slatted shadows across the sterile floor. Lila took a deep breath and gently placed her hand on Tyler's. "I'll be right here," she whispered, her heart still racing but determined. "I'll be strong for both of us." In the quiet that followed, the kind of stillness only a hospital ward at dusk can bring, Lila understood that her fight was not just for Tyler's recovery, but for the fragile peace she now owed herself. And in that fragile peace, she would find the strength to stand beside him through every beeping monitor and every silent vigil ahead. 6 months after Tyler's accident, Lila and her son had finally settled into a new rhythm that felt both fragile and hopeful. Tyler now walked with only a slight limp. His physical therapist assured them this would likely disappear with continued exercises, and his academic performance had almost returned to pre-accident levels. Though he still needed extra time on quizzes and sometimes complained of headaches that were managed with over-the-counter acetaminophen. His joyful laugh during video game sessions reminded Lila that his spirit was unbroken. Financially, they'd moved into a smaller 2-bedroom apartment in Hartford to reduce monthly rent, and Lila had taken on freelance photography assignments, senior portraits, small weddings, and graduation shoots in addition to her part-time role at the gallery. Each paycheck covered rent, groceries, and Tyler's medical copays. And though the college fund from Catherine and Robert had been withdrawn after Lila refused their conditions, Lila applied for local scholarships and set up a small savings account so that Tyler's future remained secure. Emotionally, Lila maintained strict boundaries. She returned her mother's guilt-laden letters unopened and limited her father's visits so they didn't undermine her independence. In their place, genuine support came from Tyler's daycare teachers, who offered extra help during sudden migraines, from Jack's parents in Virginia, who flew in for 2-week visits each semester, and from neighbors who dropped off casseroles when Lila had back-to-back photo shoots. That first time, Tyler laughed while pushing his toy car across the living room floor, free from beeping monitors. Lila felt a wave of gratitude, proof that they had indeed built something stronger than fear. In this new normal, every challenge became an opportunity, a hurdle in therapy, a tight financial week, or a twinge of stress only deepened the bond between mother and son and reminded them that resilience often blossoms in life's toughest seasons. Life sometimes forces us to redefine what family really means. When I watched Tyler return to school part-time with his classmates, cheering him on as he carefully navigated the hallway with a slight limp, I learned that healing isn't just physical. It happens when we protect our own boundaries, when we let go of relationships that drain our spirit, and when we lean on genuine support from friends and chosen family. My son's first laugh, months after his accident, was the moment I understood that unconditional love is more than a sentiment, It's the lifeline that carried us through sleepless nights and relentless guilt trips. Today, I encourage you to ask yourself what relationships in your life strengthen you rather than diminish you. Are you willing to set boundaries to protect your mental health and your loved ones? It's never easy to say no to someone who once held a place of authority, but standing firm teaches the next generation how to value self-respect. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between toxic expectations and your own well-being, please share your experience in the comments below. Your voice might be the light someone else needs. And if you'd like to hear more real-life journeys of courage, healing, and finding true support, hit that subscribe button now. Together, we can build a community where resilience is celebrated and no one has to face life's storms alone.